Hi, so today we're going to take our first look at a more in-depth analysis of the American Revolution. And so this is the first historical revolution that we're going to study. And so as we study, we're going to study more revolutions. I want you to think about how revolutionary was this revolution, what changed, what stayed the same. And then I also want you to think about comparing it and contrasting it to other revolutions that happened during this time period as well. So right now, what I would like you to do is go ahead and log into Blend like you normally do, complete the attendance form for today, and you may set up a piece of paper with a chart that looks like this. I'll show you in just a second, or you may actually use this Google Doc if you would prefer. And so whenever we study these revolutions, we're going to study them using the same format. So for every revolution that we study, we're going to look at what happens before. So what's going on in the world, what's going on in that particular area that might kind of cause or lead up to a revolution. Then, more specifically, we're going to look for the three main causes. So a lot of times these are going to be the three main complaints that people have against their government or against society or against the economic system. Then I want you to think about major turning points and major events. And so for a few of these, like for the American Revolution, the Declaration of Independence, the 4th of July is going to be one that you should have. Some of these are a little bit more flexible, and you can kind of put which ones you think are most important here. And perhaps one of the most important things about studying revolutions is thinking about changes. And so that was a common element in all of the revolutions that we looked at in the images from last class and also through the songs. It was about changing something. And so I want you to think about what changed with this revolution and how revolutionary was it. So I want you to think about political changes. So that's changes in the government style, maybe just changes in who is in power in the government. Maybe it's not all that different from the way it was before. I also want you to think about economic changes. Did anything change with the way people make money? Did anything change with who had money and who had that kind of economic power? And then also same thing with social changes. Did anything change with how people interact with each other in society? Did they still have the same low class, the same high class, the same middle class? Did certain people get more rights, or were people still largely excluded? Then finally, in this box here, I want you to write the long-term lasting effects on world history. So kind of what's the legacy of this revolution? Why are we studying it in world history class? Why is it special? What makes it unique? And how does it continue to shape our world today? And then finally, in the last box, what I want you to do is I want you to think about those Enlightenment thinkers and those Enlightenment ideals, like that everyone is born with the right to life, liberty, and property. And so liberty being freedom. Did people who were fighting in this revolution, were they really inspired by freedom? Or maybe you think they're more inspired by popular sovereignty, which is having a government that's based on the consent of the people. Maybe they're more inspired by equality and natural rights, and they're really demanding that they get full equality and that their natural rights are fully respected. Also, maybe they're not arguing about any of those things, and maybe really all they want is constitutionalism. Maybe all they want is rule of law. And then finally, nationalism. And so nationalism is this idea that you belong to a nation state, that you're a group of people with usually a common history. Sometimes it's like a made-up history, but a common history, a common identity, common culture, common language. And so you say, okay, we are a nation. We're all alike because of this, and we're all going to live together in this common society. So maybe it's nationalism, this desire to have your own nation, that's going to inspire people. So go ahead and make your chart. You can stop this video now, and I will go back to my slides. And so today we are looking at the American Revolution. And so this really is going to happen after the age of exploration. And so, in understanding the American Revolution, it's really important for us to remember what happened during that age of exploration. So, during the age of exploration, Europeans are colonizing North America and South America. And remember, England is going to establish these 13 colonies in North America. A lot of the colonists who are going to go settle in these English colonies, they're going to be members of this joint stock charters where they're sharing risks and they're looking for opportunities to make money and wealth. Other times they're looking for religious freedom. And so these 13 colonies, they're really going to be largely independent at the beginning of British colonialism. And so remember, at this time of European exploration, I'll go back here, the whole purpose of these colonies is to make the mother country rich. And so these people living in these British colonies, they are British subjects. So they are, I guess, citizens under the crown and under British law. However, the whole purpose of the colony itself is to enrich the crown and enrich England, enrich the mother country. And so during this time period where England is really just kind of worried about making money, they really kind of let the colonists do whatever they want. They let them make their own laws. They let them tax themselves. They create their own assemblies and representative governments, because really all England is worried about is kind of maintaining its wealth, and it's not worried about too much else until it starts to have to compete with the French. And so the colonists are continuing to settle all along the east coast of what is now the United States. And they are going to continue to settle further and further and further west into land that was actually belonged to the French. And so the reason the colonists want to settle west is because they get land, and that means they're a landowner. And so when you're a landowner, that's going to increase your wealth. It's also going to increase your social standing. And so there's a lot of benefits that come from owning land. And so as these colonists move in and encroach on this French territory, there is going to be this 7 Years' War that erupts. And so it starts in 1754, and it lasts until 1763. And so in America, we call this war the French and Indian War. However, in world history, it's called the 7 Years' War. And so the French and the British were fighting in other places of the world besides just the United States. And so what's going to happen after this French and Indian War is the British are victorious. Okay, so the British actually take this land that had once belonged to France. And so this war, like I said, was fought all over the world, really. And so after this war, England is going to be in a lot of debt, and they're going to owe a lot of money. And so what England is going to do is they are going to tax the colonists, because a good reason, or a good portion of the reason why England was fighting the French in the first place, was because the colonists kept encroaching on French lands. The colonists are also going to continue to settle and disturb Native American tribes who were living in the West as well. And so the British are going to have to, or they're going to send troops to protect the colonists. And so the British are kind of like, hey, you got us into a fight with the French. You keep on picking fights with the Native Americans. You have to pay some taxes now because you want our protection, but you're not paying for it. And so what England does is they start to create a series of new taxes on the colonists. And so the colonists don't like this at all. So remember, they were really kind of on their own and free and doing what they wanted. And so the colonists really don't like these new restrictions that are placed with them. And for one really one very, very important reason is that the colonists do not have any representation in Parliament. So remember that Enlightenment ideal of popular sovereignty? The colonists are not getting that. They say no taxation without representation. And so then there's going to be the series of boycotts to put pressure on England to change. However, eventually, through several disagreements and several conflicts, the British are going to take more and more and more power away from the colonists and start to have a heavier hand in activities that are going on in the colonies. And so some of these tensions that are going to rise, or some of these events that are going to take place that increase tensions, are going to be the Stamp Acts, where basically all paper goods are taxed. The British are going to repeal that, but then they're going to put more taxes on the colonists. And so disagreements are going to occur in the forms of things like the Boston Massacre, where the colonists are going to say that basically it's this almost like police brutality type of thing against the colonists. And there's going to be more and more uprising. The Tea Act. So the British basically, they give a monopoly to the East India Tea Company. And so the colonists are upset because that's restricting their free trade. And then the British are going to also pass what are called the Intolerable Acts, because the colonists cannot tolerate them. And so this is where the British are going to send even more troops over to the 13 British colonies. And they are also going to force the colonists to harbor or house the British soldiers. Eventually, this is going to lead to the first battle of the Revolutionary War, Lexington and Concord. And so this battle at 1775 is typically known as the shot heard around the world. And so the American Revolution is the first revolution that we really study, and a lot of historians say that it's going to inspire the French Revolution and Latin American independence movements and other revolutions of the same time period, and even future revolutions. And so as the Americans are organizing, and I wouldn't call them Americans just yet. And so this is something else too. They're calling themselves Americans here, right? So we're saying Americans. There was no America just yet. They were still British subjects. So they were British colonists until they write the Declaration of Independence and they say, we are the United States of America. Okay. And so they're going to base this new government or this new nation off of certain ideals that they really connect to the Enlightenment thinkers. So they're really going to say our country, our nation, this is the development of nationalism, is going to believe that all people are born with natural rights, including life, liberty, and property. We are going to believe that kings can be overthrown if they violate people's natural rights. And we believe that the government power comes from the consent of the governed. And that's what they're going to say are their national ideals, and kind of what we still say are our national ideals. And so these British abuses and really kind of the denial of the colonist rights as British subjects is going to lead them to draft the Declaration of Independence. And so this is going to be a change in the way people think about governments. And it's also going to be a change of the way the colonists view themselves. They are no longer saying that they are subjects of the British king, but they are saying now we are our own independent nation, our own independent people. And this is what we are going to say are our beliefs. And this is what is going to tie us together as a nation. And like I said, they're inspired by the Enlightenment philosophers. They say all men are created equal. Of course, we know, except for slaves, they find ways to justify that, except for women, also, except for men who didn't own land. And so there were a lot of excepts. And so everybody was born equal was very exclusive. And so even the consent of the governed was very exclusive as well. And so there's kind of a lot of flaws in American revolutionaries living up to those ideals, or at least we would say so today. And so on July 4th, 1776, the Americans send King George III the Declaration of Independence to say, we are no longer your subjects. We are our own people. And so really the Declaration of Independence is a document that really lists the grievances for why the Americans want to become their own country. And really they say, hey, man, it's because you did not protect our natural rights. You were taking our natural rights to life, liberty, and property away. You were not listening to us. We had the government was over us, and it was not by rule of the people, so we want out. They were, and something else they believed is that when the government did not uphold their rights, they had the right to overthrow it. And so those are the things that they list in that Declaration of Independence, along with other grievances or reasons for rebelling and wanting to become their own nation. And so the Revolutionary War is going to last from 1775 to 1783. And I'm going to kind of go through these kind of fast with the battles. You'll study that more if you take APUSH next year. So we're going to focus on the after effects. So after effects, all of this green area that was once the British or belonged to the British is now going to belong to the United States. This area, Canada, is still going to belong to the to Britain. And so the United States is going to have to come up with a way to rule over this territory. And so what it's going to do is it is going to develop this system of governing. And so we say it developed and they were inspired by the Greeks and the Romans, but they were also inspired by the Iroquois nations, Native Americans who were living there before, who had this federalism concept of having your kind of independent territories and independent states, but loosely connected with a national government. And so this is going to be called a federal system. And so the intent, the thought behind it is that you're going to allow people to make their own rules. So remember, popular sovereignty was really important to the founding fathers. And so from that, however, the government they set up is a little bit too weak and they have to come up with a new constitution. But the American Revolution and its importance to world history is the first time a colony overthrew its mother country. And so that's pretty extraordinary. And so this is going to cause a ripple effect in the Americas. It was also the first time a government was created using Enlightenment ideas and of limited government and individual liberty. And actually, I would kind of disagree with this, because if you look at the English Bill of Rights, and if you look at the British Parliament and those types of things, those really kind of do have those Enlightenment ideas. And it's just that the Americans weren't getting those rights, and that's why they rebelled. And so the American Revolution is going to inspire the French Revolution, and it's also going to inspire the Latin American independence movements as well.